Hey guys, so it's December, which means it's almost time for Christmas. So I am going to take a little inspiration from Haley in Bookland and do a Bookmas series. I'm planning on doing one every day, but we'll see how this goes. That may have to slow down depending on how I'm finding the workload. And you might notice that my background is very plain right now, which is one sad little decoration right here. That's because I'm planning on adding as time goes on. I'll probably add a new decoration every couple of days or so yeah, we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to start out by doubling this up with another of my series, which is Drawn into Narnia. So I'm going to do a little side video about the symbolism of the gifts, because probably the most Christmassy moment we have in all of Chronicles of Narnia is in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Peter, Susan, and Lucy receive their gifts from Father Christmas. And just to warn you, this is not going to be spoiler safe for either Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or Prince Caspian. It probably isn't going to go super heavy into anything, but just be aware of that. So just for a bit of context for the scene, just a reminder, a refresher for all of us, or if you haven't heard the scene, then this is what's going on. The three Pevensie siblings, there's actually four of them, but there's only three of them in this scene. Peter's the oldest, then Susan, then Lucy. They are on the run with the Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and they're trying to hide from the White Witch. And they end up running into Father Christmas, who should not be in Narnia because the witch cast a spell so that it would always be winter but never Christmas. So this is a sign that the White Witch's magic is weakening. And he gives the three children each gifts that they use for the remainder of their time in Narnia. And they also use them in subsequent books whenever they're around. Now, the gifts are physical objects, but they tend to have a lot of symbolism and idea and magic surrounding them. One thing I noticed when I was kind of taking my notes and preparing for this video is that all three of them receive two gifts, but one of those gifts tends to get a bit more attention than the other. And they aren't always complementary in ways that you would expect, but they do work together. So starting with Peter, because I'm going to go in age order, he received a sword and a shield. Now, these two objects are not overtly magical, which is what the other ones often are, but they are very, very important, and he does use them. And they also become highly symbolic. So first of all, his less talked about gift of the two, I would say, is the shield. It is pretty much just assumed that whenever he has the sword, he probably has the shield as well. It's usually referred to in conjunction with the sword. But the symbolism of the shield is, I would say, pretty obvious protection, and that is something that is very associated with Peter. It's even brought up more in the movies, I would say, than in the books, but it is definitely a thing where he's very protective of his family and wants to keep them safe. You can see that he feels a lot of guilt when Edmund chooses to side with the White Witch, and you can see that he really fights desperately to protect his family, and later on when he's King of Narnia, to protect Narnia. He even, in Prince Caspian, puts his life on the line in a one-on-one combat for it. And of course the other side of this is his sword, which actually has a name. It's not used very often, and I don't know if it's ever mentioned in the movies, but it does have a name, Rindon. And the sword is named at the same time that Peter receives his first title, if you will. He's knighted by Aslan and given the title Sir Peter Wolfsbane, because he just killed a wolf with his sword. Now, interestingly, in this first instance of the sword appearing, it's also associated with protection, because it's used in defense of Susan and Lucy, who are up this tree trying to get away from this wolf, this talking wolf that's trying to kill them, and there's also like an entire pavilion of other people who are just fleeing from this wolf because it's been sent by the witch. And that becomes a continuing thing with Peter. His sword is used in defense of Narnia and of the people he loves, same as the shield is, except that it's done in a more offensive way. Depending on where you're looking at, of course. When he fights Moghram, the wolf, Moghram is the aggressor in that fight. But it is still, you do have to actively act to fight with a sword. Usually. And it's a little bit more complicated in the movie, but usually. And there's also one moment that I love in the movie that's added the first time Peter uses his sword, if I'm remembering correctly, is he uses it to stab into the ice so that him and his sisters have something to hold on to when the river breaks apart and they're floating down. So again, kind of used in defense and protection there, but not really. But that's in the movie, not the books, but I think it is something Peter would do. I actually really like that version of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. But probably the most notable example of Peter using Rindon, apart from the fight with Moghram, because that's the moment when he first uses his sword in battle, is his fight with Miraz at the end of Prince Caspian. Now, it's not, like, the book never goes out of its way to say he fought this fight with Rindon, but he very obviously gets the sword back at the beginning of the book. The book makes a point of telling us that. And then it's kind of like, why would he not use it? So I think it's safe to assume he was probably using it in this fight. So in that scene, we see him using his sword to defend all of Narnia, to help restore peace and order. Because one thing I forgot to mention, earlier on in this, Peter's title when he was High King of Narnia, or his moniker, or whatever you want to call it, was the Magnificent. He was High King Peter the Magnificent. And incidentally, the number of titles he has is nuts. He's High King of Narnia, Emperor of the Lone Islands, Lord of Caer-Paravel, and I think there might be one or two others that I'm also forgetting, but yeah, he's got a bunch of titles. But he was known as the Magnificent when he was High King. And quick, there is going to be a couple spoilers for Horse and His Boy as well. Not super major, but they will be here, so just be aware of that. So in Horse and His Boy, we see all of the Pevensies except Peter. Where is Peter? Peter is in the north of Narnia fighting the giants who live on their borders. So again, he's using it in defense of his people, but also it's kind of an offensive thing there because, well, we don't actually know who was the aggressor in that. Based on how it's framed, I would say it was probably the giants, but we don't actually know. So the main symbolism here seems to be defense and protection, but there is also honor and nobility being shown here. Because he's knighted. The first time he uses this sword, he is knighted by Aslan. That's how he becomes Sir Peter Wolfsbane. And you also see how the way he carries himself when he, as king. In Prince Caspian, when he takes his position of High King, everything is conducted very, very, very carefully with a lot of honor. They all follow the correct procedures. Even when he's organizing single combat with Miraz, you can tell he knows exactly what he's supposed to do and he follows the patterns precisely. Next up in the birth order, we have Susan. Now, Susan's two gifts are probably the two that are, generally speaking, the most distinct from each other while still getting the most attention out of all of the gifts. And those are her horn and her bow and arrow. So I'm going to start with the bow and arrow just because the horn is a lot. The bow and arrow is one that it doesn't get as much attention as, say, the sword does, I would say. But it does get a lot of attention in that you do see Susan actively using it. It does have a section in Prince Caspian where she uses it in a contest against Trumpkin. It actually gets a fair amount of attention in that way, and we're told that she becomes a very incredible archer. She's probably one of the best archers Narnia ever had, actually. And that is partially because of the arrow. When Father Christmas gives it to her, I can't remember the exact wording right now, but he basically says, this bow doesn't often miss. So what does the bow and the quiver of arrows symbolize here? There's a couple things that I would say. Firstly, it's a long-range weapon. Susan, we know, is someone who does not enjoy battle. Contrary to what the Prince Caspian movie might tell you, Susan avoided fights when she could. That's something that's explicitly said in The Horse and His Boy. If she was the one who would stay behind and take care of Caer-Paravel and run the castle and reign, while the others would go out to fight, including Lucy, incidentally. So, yeah, I'm sorry, that's one of the... Okay, I'm all for giving the female characters more power and more representation, but it irritates me because that's something that's explicitly worked into her character, especially since her title, Queen Susan the Gentle. I'm kind of like... And I'll talk more about this when I get to Lucy, because her title is the Valiant. And yeah, so I kind of feel like if they were going to give one of the two girls fighting time, it really should have been Lucy based on their personalities. I mean, I get it. I do. Lucy, like, there was reasons, but sorry. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. I can rant about the movies in another video. But yes, Susan is referred to as Queen Susan the Gentle. When she becomes queen, that is her moniker that she's given. The thing is that archery is just as much a hunting weapon as it is a defense weapon, particularly in a medieval fantasy world like Narnia. So in that way, you see a little bit of the emphasis of providing for her family. I personally don't think Susan ever hunted with her bow because, one, I don't think she would want to, because I can't see her really enjoying that. And two, I don't think she really would have had the time or necessity. She was a queen. She would have been very, very busy running the country, and there would have been other people who could do that kind of thing for her. But the symbolism is still there of protection and provision. Because Susan is a protector, just not in as overt a way as Peter is. That's another bit of the symbolism here, actually. You can see how she is she's kind of has a more maternal protectiveness. For instance, at the beginning of Prince Caspian, when the four of them are going off to a boarding school. It's Lucy's first time going to boarding school, and Susan says, don't worry, I'll be there whenever you need me. So you see that instinct to kind of take care of and shield her younger siblings. I really like Anna Popwell as Susan, actually, in the live-action early 2000s movies, because I think she really gets that, especially in the first movie. Another very, very reaching bit of symbolism you could get with the long-range aspect of the arrows is how Susan seems to be one of the siblings who was most involved in international diplomacy, and she's the one that we see being courted by Prince Rabbitash in Horse and His Boy, and we do know that she had a lot of suitors from different countries. So yeah, I think they were all involved with the diplomacy, but it was definitely a big thing with Susan. And now for the horn, because yes, the symbolism of the horn, all right. The horn is, of course, Susan's second gift. And it is perhaps, at least I would say, the most important plot-wise to the series out of the gifts, because that's how the Pevensies get back to Narnia at the beginning of Prince Caspian, is the horn. It's so powerful and so important that it has an actual mythology built up around it when Prince Caspian starts. And the horn, I think, actually has very similar tones to the bow and arrow in terms of its symbolism, which makes sense because it's going to the same person. It has the protective symbolism in that it's calling for help, calling for reinforcements, basically, to protect someone. There's a certain amount of bringing people together, though, with the horn as well. It's used as a way of bringing two groups of people together, or a person and another group. I've discussed the symbolism of the horn a little bit more in some of my other videos, so I don't want to go into it too much here, but yeah, it's a symbol of hope. It's a symbol of guardianship and protection. It's a symbol of connection to Aslan as well. And these are all things that Susan either embodies or seems to want to embody. She struggles a little bit with the connection with Aslan, but you can see her fighting for it in Prince Caspian. And yeah, I'll talk more about that in another video. There's stuff involved with that. So I'm going to leave Susan's stuff here, and I think I'm actually going to split this video in two because I have the space for it. I'll release the second half of this tomorrow. And I can tell based on the time frame that this video is going to be very long if I try and keep it in one. So I'm going to cut it off here, and I will cover Edmund and Lucy tomorrow. Because yes, while Edmund did not get a gift from Father Christmas, I do want to discuss a little bit about his relationship to the gifts. Anyway, thanks for watching, you guys. Have a wonderful December, and Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention about the symbolism of the horn. There's also a certain symbolism of passing on the torch, because while Susan is the initial holder of the horn, it gets passed on to Caspian and kind of becomes almost a symbol of his kingship in some ways. So yeah, that was just one other little tidbit.